Welcome back yet again. So today we are actually going to move on to the case studies. Now that you've finished all the concepts, and notice that in in Poly 360, we're going to dig deeper into a bunch of the concepts that we've talked about at the beginning of the semester. But again, the second part of the semester is really using the case studies to learn about sampling some of the semi-representative countries of the world. We've got various continents, cultures, systems, regime types. We're going to compare states along particular dimensions. How is one system more advantageous or disadvantageous relative to another? And we're going to generate lessons from case studies, implications for state development, especially the likelihood of successful democratization. And there is a separate class which I teach on democratization if you're interested. So again, now we're moving to the case studies and moving away from, beginning to apply, I should say, rather than moving away from the various concepts that we've explored early on. So the first case that we're going to look at, obviously, is the UK. Today it's going to be, well, I guess it's always sort of listening because this is an online class. Usually I have more sort of room for people to stick up their hands, but I'll probably stick up some discussion questions based on the UK case, and I'll expect you to make some comparisons. So the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is the oldest democracy. It's come to democracy through an evolutionary process. It's unusual in terms of the advanced democracies in that it has no written constitution. And we'll talk about how that works. So a little bit of background. We're talking about, 60 million or so residents, and we're talking about three nations. Remember what a nation is. So we're talking about England, Scotland, and Wales, plus the northeast of Ireland. It is a highly urbanized country. It's about 90% urbanized, so a very urbanized country. It's also multi-ethnic. Again, Scottish, Welsh in Wales, English, England, and then you've got the Irish. But it is almost all white. It's 92% white. London is the big exception. This ethnic dimension, though, has led to tensions. There have been separatist movements that have been generally weak, except, of course, in the case of Ireland, which we'll talk about. But more recently in Scotland, they've gained steam. And the Scottish movement, oh, geez, how long is this video going to stay on for? Well, in 2014, the Scottish are holding a referendum to see if they want independence or not. So hopefully I won't have to revise that again. But it looks like the Scottish will not choose independence as of right now. Geez, I'm digging myself in a hole. But I'll revise that if that changes. So on Ireland, this is a really important one because there's been so much violence there over the last several decades, up until a decade or so ago. So the UK, this whole territory was Catholic until King Henry VIII couldn't get a divorce from the Vatican, and so he broke away in 1534 from the church, and thanks to Parliament, he adopted the Protestant church, created a Protestant church which is controlled by the state, known as the Anglican Church. In Northern Ireland, you've got a population that's about 40% Catholic and 60% Protestant, and the Catholic minority has historically been discriminated against in terms of employment, educational opportunities, and finally in the 1960s they formed the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. This is an example of a traditional terrorist organization. And the goal of the IRA was to connect North Ireland to the rest of Ireland, which had become independent back in 1921. And throughout the conflict from the 1960s really up through the 1990s, you had more than 4,000 deaths in this area. And remember, this is, for an advanced democracy, this stands out as an unusual case. You could talk about Spain with the ETA as well. Again, there are other ethnic groups in the UK. You've got the Scots up here. You've got the Welsh down here, and they've demanded greater local autonomy. But the mainstream parties have really not looked for outright independence until the Scottish National Party, after the 2011 elections, decided that it would demand a referendum on independence. Generally speaking, there's been class conflict historically in the UK, but it's become more mild. But there still are perceptions of elite, it's the elite versus the working class. And this was emphasized by the resignation of a minister in 2012 when he called a cop, known as a bobby there, a quote-unquote pleb, which is a derogatory term for a commoner, when that cop tried to stop him from biking in a certain area. "Hey, you pleb," or something like that. You know, any of you with English accents are going to say, "Hey, what did you just say?" Anyway, we're also talking about a country that's been historically very liberal in terms of a hands-off economic sense. But after World War II, it's been promoting much more social democratic values, state intervention, more social equality. And then this fell back a little bit and became a little bit more liberal under the conservatives in the 1970s because of an economic crisis which demanded change. So this map right here sort of separates the nations, if you will. So you've got the Scots here, you've got the Welsh here, you've got English here, and then you've got the Irish up here, and then of course in the rest of Ireland down here. So in terms of where they are, note here you can see a little piece of France over here, but they've been separate from Europe forever until 1994 when they created the Chunnel. They opened the Chunnel, which was this tunnel that would go from right about here underneath the English Channel. And this had major consequences on the political development, this isolation from Europe up until very recently. Historically, they never needed much of an army. They eventually had a big fat navy, though. And, you know, if you look here, sorry, here's a picture of the British Empire, and their big fat navy went all over the world. So the sun never sun never sits on the sun never sinks. Oh, the sun didn't do something in the British Empire. The sun never, it never went down. So today they remain really separated from Europe in part through ideology, and you can trace this back to their evolutionary history. And going back to this separation, there's a hesitance to deal too closely with Europe. They're still not a euro holder. They've got strong fears for their sovereignty. They feel they've got a very different economy than on the continent, where agriculture is much more of a mainstay and it's highly subsidized. And they maintained an identity which is separate from the rest of Europe. They still have close relations with the Americans, with us, and this is another sign of that, the more liberal trend within them. So today they've got a large military. They're one of a handful of nuclear powers. They occasionally flex their muscles. The Falkland War stands out. They participated in Iraq. They were, I think, the second largest coalition partner, and then I think came the Poles. Traditionally, there have been lots of invasions from sea. And so if you go over here, this is traditionally where England was suffered. So we're talking about the Romans, the Angles and Saxons, the Danes, the Normans. In 1066, William the Conqueror hopped over from France and brought feudalism to UK. Now this is important because 1066 was the last successful invasion of Britain. Germany dropped a lot of bombs, but there wasn't a successful invasion, or even an attempt, as far as I know. They were once, one last comment, the UK was once at the top of the pack in terms of their economy. They were at the very top. They dominated the world, and now they're in the top 20 or so, but still one of the largest economies in the world. This is an evolved democracy, and we'll begin talking about this, how they got there, in the next set of slides. Stop.